Today I'm presenting my research project titled A Chosen Nation, Religious Identity and the Formation of American Founding Ideals, 1740 to 1800. This study explores how New England's Protestant religious identity did not simply coexist with the development of American political thought, but actively shaped the very moral and conceptual foundations of the United States. My project challenges the common assumption that American founding ideals emerged primarily from Enlightenment secularism. Instead, I argue that from 1740 to 1800, New England transformed its Protestant religious heritage into a moral political framework that helped define the nation's concepts of liberty, rights, virtue, and constitutional order. Rather than fading in the face of Enlightenment rationalism, Protestant theology interacted dynamically with it. The result was a theological political synthesis that cast divine justice, human agency, and covenantal community as civic virtues. This fusion created what I describe as a quasi-theological vision of nationhood, a vision embedded within the supposedly secular language of the American founding. A major part of this story begins with the First Great Awakening. Revivalists such as Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield revolutionized religious life in New England by emphasizing personal conversation, emotional piety, and the individual's direct relationship with God. This shift had profound political implications. The awakening cultivated a sense of individual agency and moral responsibility that paralleled growing ideas about political self-determination. When believers learned to challenge ecclesiastical authority in the name of conscience, they inadvertently strengthened the intellectual tools that colonists later used to challenge imperial authority. In other words, the language of spiritual liberty became the model for civil liberty. New England's long-standing covenant tradition also played a crucial role in Puritan theology. The covenant represented a reciprocal relationship between God and community. During the 18th century, ministers and lay leaders began reinterpreting this covenant in civic terms. Covenantal thinking evolved into political concepts of constitutionalism, communal obligation, and moral citizenship. Sermons, pamphlets, and election addresses all framed liberty as a trust from God that required virtue, self-restraint, and collective responsibility. Figures such as Jonathan Mayhew and Samuel Cooper blended scriptural ideas of justice with arguments for resistance to tyranny, demonstrating how theological commitments could lead to legitimate political action. By the time of the Revolution, many New Englanders understood political independence not as a break from religious identity, but as its fulfillment, a kind of new covenant expressed through Republican ideals. My project also examines how Enlightenment rationalism entered this landscape, contrary to the idea that reason replaced revelation. New England thinkers combined the two ministers and intellectuals created what can be described as Enlightened Calvinism, or rational Puritanism, maintaining belief in providence and moral accountability while embracing the natural law, human improvement, and rational inquiry. This synthesis allowed Americans to speak confidently about natural rights, moral order, and constitutional government with both religious conviction and philosophical coherence. Ideas that appear secular today, such as natural rights or government by consent, often carry deep theological roots. Understanding this religious genealogy reshapes how we view the American founding, the moral vocabulary of the early republic. Its emphasis on virtue, conscience, and communal responsibility cannot be explained by Enlightenment thought alone. It emerged from the creative adaptation of Protestant theology to new political realities. By tracing how covenant became constitution and how providence became progress, my project shows that the American democratic experiment was built not on the abandonment of religion, but on its transformation. In exploring the period from 1740 to 1800, this study reveals that faith and freedom in the American tradition were never separate forces. They were deeply intertwined. Understanding this relationship helps us better grasp both the origins and the ongoing influence of America's moral and political identity.